Hey, how you all doing? Thanks for joining me on this Easter evening over in the West and Monday morning here in Asia in the East. Neil Han, how you doing? Harold B, Polynesian Pip, aloha. Pablo Pina again, Sepa J, Tweety Bird, how you doing? Jay Delaney, how you doing? And happy Easter. Today we're going to be taking a look at sanctions. Excuse me. We'll be taking a look at sanctions. What are they? What's sort of the history behind them? If they work, if they don't work, what happens if they don't? This isn't really a political outlook. It's more just the objective, the outlook of sanctions. So, there are some pretty interesting things involved with it. And we'll be taking a look at a few items from Gerald Celente's Trends Journal, a few items from Twitter. And we'll also be taking a look at last week's guest, Egon von Greyer's, a few things he had to say. So, I'll be with you guys shortly. Give me a minute or so, and thumbs ups. Greatly appreciated. Thank you all for being here again. Patrick Bateman, 49 Rod Panhard, how you doing? Be with you guys shortly. Hey, there we go. Wow. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Silver Bullion Television, SBTV. I'm your host, Patrick Vieira, and this is our live stream. So, again, thank you for joining us this evening over in the West, this morning over in the East here in Asia. Appreciate you guys being here again. Just want to give a quick roll call. Bill Wood, Mr. Nguyen, Pablo Pina, how you doing? MiG-26, aloha. Narong, how you doing? And Xavier J. Hey, guys, if you are new, go ahead, type in new and where you're from. And if you do have any questions, type in a big letter Q so that way we can see what your questions are. And of course, good morning to Vincent. Thank you for joining me, Vincent. Vincent's out there. One day he's going to be on here. I'm pretty sure about that. So we'll have to convince Vincent to get on. But again, thank you all for being here. Really do appreciate it. As always, you can find us on social media. silverbullion.com.sg is our website. Yes, we do sell gold and silver, but more than that, we help to prepare you for this upcoming systemic wealth event. Systemic wealth protection is what we're about. So please do shoot us an email, sales@silverbullion.com.sg if you have concerns about what may be coming ahead. And we'll let you know what we can do for you, and we'll see if it's a fit and if we can do these things and get through them together. Silver Bullion SG is where you can find us on Facebook. Silver Bullion PL is our handle on Twitter. PL for Private Limited. Silver Bullion SG is where you can find us on Instagram, and audio-only versions of our programs can be found at bit.ly/SBTV iTunes or SBTV Spotify and Crisis Tracker. If you have that Telegram app, search one word, Crisis Tracker. And this is where you'll find Vincent and I, where we do post things pretty much daily as it pertains to economics, finance, gold, silver, things like that. Things that are pretty important to us. Help kind of navigate through what's going on. So those are the places you can find us on social media. So again, welcome one, welcome all. Glad you could be here and join us. Upcoming guest, very interesting guy. Some of you may already know who he is or know about him. He is Keith Weiner, founder and CEO of Monetary Metal. A Monetary Metal is an investment firm that is unlocking the productivity of gold, and Keith believes gold should once again serve to finance productive enterprises and extinguish debts. And Keith also serves as founder and president of the Gold Standard Institute USA. So that should be a pretty interesting interview with Keith Weiner. So again, we do hope that you sign up, subscribe, and hit the bell so we can notify you when this interview comes up. So, upcoming guest Keith Weiner. Sorry, guys, I'm just trying to catch. I got a lot of things on the side going on, just trying to catch up with them. But again, thanks for being here. And ebook giveaway. Let's get to that. This time it's been this way for a while. Sorry, guys, it's been the Amazon gift card. So we'll be giving away a $10 gift card. A lot of you folks have already won it. I hope it's worked out well for you. So if you want to win this gift card, here are the rules to go ahead and get it. Be one of the first 5 to answer correctly in this live stream before the timer runs out. So it's going to have to be in this live stream. And US winners are going to be given a link to go ahead and get that gift card. We'll send it out after the live stream. Non-US winners, you may or may not have to contact Amazon to arrange something with their customer service to help you to find a way to get that gift card, or at least to find a way to use that gift card. Excuse me. Sometimes, depending on the region that you live, you may or may not be able to use it, but customer service is pretty good, so they'll help you out with that. And again, you'll have to provide us an email during this live stream, so that way we'll have it and we can contact you a bit later on. All right. So having all said that, let me just run through this again. Vincent is, he's saying do join that Crisis Tracker group. So if you have that Telegram app, or even if you don't, go ahead and download it, mobile or desktop. And one word, Crisis Tracker, and that way we can go ahead and help to keep you abreast and sift through the weeds of all the news that's out there. So thanks for that, Vincent. Carrie Ellen Wilder, yes, I do and I will. I do and I will. Let's see. Yeah, Keith, smart guy. Halby, Keith is he's a very smart guy. You know, when you talk to him, he's very colorful. Uses a lot of metaphors. Very, very colorful guy. Very, again, interesting when you do have a chance to talk to him. Absolutely, he definitely has big picture outlooks, as you were saying. Let's see what else is out there. Okay, yeah, a lot of you guys feel like Keith Weiner's pretty awesome. So great. So having said that, let's get to the question. The question coming from the Egon Von Greer's interview to win that $10 Amazon gift prize. Question is, the U.S. is a blank nation. The U.S. is a blank nation. One word, or maybe one word, actually, one word. The U.S. is a blank nation, according to Egon Von Greer's, and he's looking at, a lot of the situations and circumstances that the U.S. is in. He's looking at the debt that the U.S. is having right now, or has had for a while. He's looking at quite a few different things, and when he came out with this statement where he said the U.S. is a blank nation. So let's take a look at some of the answers coming in. Let's see. We got James Richter, bankrupt. We have, let's see. Oh, that moved pretty quick. James Richter is saying bankrupt. Where else did we go? Silver Delta is saying sovereign. Tweety Bird, debtor. Sepa J, debtor. Xavier J, bankrupt. VK Travel. VK Travelog, yes. Gotta laugh on that one. Communist. Patrick Bateman, debt. 49 fine, debt. Okay, Power Pina, power. Okay. The U.S. is a blank nation. Mr. Nguyen says bankrupt. Jason saying lost. Yeah, lost. I like that one. Rod Panhard is saying bankrupt. And let's see, what else do we have? Okay. I think also the okay. Sorry, just looking through this real quick. Okay. Rob G will get that one in there for you. Okay, the answer is bankrupt, as you guys can see here. For the winners, we do have, let's see, we're going to take a look at it. Rod Panhard, bankrupt. Mr. Nguyen, bankrupt. James Richter also says bankrupt. Xavier J, bankrupt. And Rob G also says bankrupt. So those will be the 5 winners. And just to make sure it is bankrupt, we'll go ahead and take a look at what Egon had to say.
Don't keep any money in dollars. It's a high risk. Because the thing is that the US is still in a position to use this weapon, and the world is still listening to the US. But the US, as I've pointed out in many articles, is a bankrupt nation. They've been running deficits since 1930. Just in 71, I mean, the debt is up 60 times, and GDP is up just over 20 times. So they're printing more and more money to survive. And that bubble is now in the process of bursting. And that means also bursting of the US economy, all the inflated assets, but also bursting of the dollar. The next fall now to zero is going to happen. And there's only 2% left, but that 2% is 100% from here. And that's going to happen, and dollar is going to collapse. Nobody will want dollars from having been the currency that everybody wanted to hold. It's going to be the opposite. Nobody will want dollars. Problem is, of course, there is no currency to take over from the dollar. There's no one single currency that will become a global currency for quite a while, at least. So there will be lots of different currencies.
All right, so Egon making a lot of sense there, as he always does. Keeping money in dollars is a high risk. When growing up, when would you ever think that? When would you ever think it? But today, you have to think that keeping money in dollars is a high risk. The U.S. weaponizes the dollar. We know this. The world still uses and listens to the U.S. and its dollar, but the U.S. is a bankrupt nation. The dollar bubble is in the process of bursting. Nobody will want dollars, and there will be lots of currencies. So what are your thoughts on this with what Egon had to say, especially with the dollar? Keeping money in dollars is a risk. So I'd like to see what you folks have to say with that. So again, 5 winners. I just want to run through this, make sure Vincent also can confirm it. Rod Panhard, we have Mr. Nguyen, we have James Richter, we have Xavier J, and we also have Rob G. Okay, so again, those are the 5 winners. So I'll move on to another clip from Egon von Greyer's.
I don't like governments controlling gold. I prefer free gold that is actually not controlled by anyone, and that the market determines the price of gold. That's, of course, not the case at all now. But I think that what we're seeing now with the Russian actions, and as I said, linking it to the ruble, that will eventually mean that the demand for gold will increase, and it will destroy the futures markets in gold. They have been manipulated for such a long time, and they need to be destroyed. That's the only way we can get free gold moving without massive manipulation by the BIS through the central banks and the bullion banks. But you can't have real money being backed by several 100 times of paper gold. And that's what's happening at these futures exchanges. When that bursts, combined with a demand for real physical gold, then those futures markets are going to collapse so quickly that no one can imagine.
All right. Once again, Egon. The market needs to determine the price of gold. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Market needs to determine the price of gold. And I'm going to add one more thing in there. The physical market. The physical market needs to determine the price of gold, not the, I'll just say not the papers market, not the futures market. It's paper. It's too easy to create. You know how the physical market. Physical market needs to determine the price of gold. Essentially, should any currency be backed by gold, see a little typo there, be backed by gold, it will destroy the futures markets. It's true. To get free gold, the futures markets need to be destroyed. Now, what are your thoughts on that? Futures market, they need to be destroyed. And that was kind of interesting because what I want to ask Keith Weiner is, should, let's say, Russia or some other country also back their currency by gold, what then happens to the futures markets? So that's going to be a question that I plan to ask him. What happens to the futures market? Is this a way to destroy the futures market? Is when you go ahead and back a currency by gold? Something to think about there. So let me move forward to another clip from Egon von Greyer's.
All asset markets are going to come down together, and sadly, it'll be a horrible situation for the world. That's what you get at the end of eras. It is the biggest speculative bubble era in history. because we've never had it basically around the world before. It's never been global. Now it's virtually every country is in the same situation. And that's totally unique in world history. There will be no one to save another country. Before, when we had bubbles, then the rest of the world could just write off the debt. Now we can't write off the debt. So this debt will just have to implode. And when debt implodes, of course, the asset prices implode at the same time, because that debt is supporting assets. And therefore, we're going to see a reset of proportions that's never been seen before in history.
Ooh, Egon, man. All assets markets will come down. True, absolutely agree with that. And this is what you get at the end of eras. Debt will implode and the assets on the other side of the ledger will implode as well. Remember, there's two sides of that ledger, right? Two sides of the ledger. It's something we often forget about there. And we will see a reset of proportions never before seen in history. So what are your thoughts on this? Just want to clean house a bit before we move on. I do have, let's see here, James Richter, Xavier J, Mr. Nguyen, Rob Panhard. Oh, hang on, let me pull that back up. So each of you and Rob G, please do email us at sbtv@silverbullion.com.sg. This is your first time winning. So again, thank you, Vincent, for bringing that up. Let's see what else is out there. Tweety Bird, great point. They won't $1, but they will take gold and silver. Absolutely, I completely agree with that. Casey Willis, Western media equals echo chamber of lies. Tell you what, it's getting harder and harder to really sort through things and piece them together to get truth in things nowadays. So yeah, I can see why you're there. Carrie Ellen Wilder, what Egon says is true, right, and just. Absolutely, Egon. He had quite a bit to say. Egon is a legend. True. Okay, so let's move on a bit. Let me check out some comments here. Hang on, I need to pull up one. Let me see. Let's see. Polynesian Pip. Hang on. Let me see if it's there. Sorry about that. Okay. Let's add on Polynesian Pip. Sorry about that. Okay, my mistake. So we'll correct that. We'll give out 6 Amazon gift cards. So Polynesian Pip, yes, you are in there. Sorry about that. Had to clear that one up. Okay, so moving on to Gerald Celente's Trends Journal. His weekly message: inventory and supply pressure and sanction threatens the dollar's supremacy. I tell you what, maybe we'll just go with the first two: his weekly message and inventory and supply pressure. Excuse me. His weekly message: the bug, which started back in 2020 by a big country starting with letter C, continues to destroy lives, livelihoods, and the human spirit throughout the world. Despite a long list of draconian orders imposed upon we the people by politicians to so-called flatten the curve, it did nothing to stop the bug, but it flattened our lives. And many businesses on Main Street have gone, and many downtowns have turned into ghost towns. Bars are empty and nightlife is dead. As I have long said, being Gerald Celente, when people lose everything, they lose it. As we are going to press, at that time when that Trends Journal was going to press, the gunman opened fire in a Brooklyn subway car and threw a smoke grenade, injuring some 30 people, some critically. The incident is a reminder that society's mental state is crumbling and getting worse. The world is on the cusp of WW3. Equity markets are being rattled and inflation is skyrocketing. The world is filled with uncertainty. Absolutely. Moving on to inventory and supply pressure, the monthly logistics manager survey compiled by 5 U.S. universities rose from 75.2 in February to 76.2 in March. So this survey samples conditions related to managing stock inventories, warehousing, and transportation. Ratings above 50 indicate business momentum. The higher the number, the stronger the activity. The amount of inventory in warehouses dropped from February's rating of 80.2 to 75.7, indicating less stock is on hand. However, the cost of keeping inventory shot to a record 91, the report said. Available warehouse space suffered a rather precipitous drop last month. The survey noted driving prices for storage space to an all-time high rating of 90.5. Continued inventory congestion has driven inventory costs, warehousing prices, and overall aggregate logistics costs to all-time high levels, the report said. Now, this is putting even more pressure on already constrained capacity. Businesses stockpiled inventory during the bug and afterward, as consumer demand roared back. Now, the same companies are building cushions of stock against worldwide shortages and future price increases, while wondering if keeping large inventories on hand will be a new necessity, an important element of safety in uncertain times, the survey report said. The inventory costs are anticipated to remain very high throughout the next 12 months, the survey found, and some businesses expect to hold a lot of inventory in the next year and pay a significant amount to do so, it said. With capacity as short as it has been over the last 18 months, it would take a lot to get to the point where supply is really outstripping demand, is what he added there. And that'll wrap up the guest revisit. I'll just cut that one down to one article there. So this kind of falls back to what Gerald Celente had pointed out, where I believe it was in Europe or UK specifically, firms were looking to buy warehouse space because they kind of saw that this was going to be needed, where they were going to have to stock up on supplies or goods, things like that, products, and house them or warehouse them. So this was kind of seen, and now it's starting to unfold. So again, another trend that Gerald had pointed out, and another reason why Trends Journal is really one of my go-to places that I like to share with you. All right, so getting back to some of the comments here. Yes, coming from Vincent, Polynesian Pip, congrats. We already have your email. So, okay, Polynesian Pip got it taken care of. Built for Tough. WW3 is in full swing. You know what? It's hard to say no. But I tell you what, it's definitely like I said before, spaghetti bubbles. You know, you get that one bubble, then a second bubble, and a third bubble. Before you know it, it's just bubbling all over the place. I think we do have a couple of these bubbles really starting to surface. So let me turn this down a bit. So great comment there. Let's see what else is out there. Gary Harvey, inflation rates running higher than Great Recession. That is true. Great Recession. Housing market not in certain rates, and workers kept out of other surveys. Okay, I have to look into that one. You brought up that's a good point there. Great point there. Let's see. Jack Bricker, first time I've seen you here, Jack. Welcome aboard. If comics price is artificial, shouldn't the spot price be far higher? You know, that's a great question. It's why people talk about bifurcate. Where you know the paper price, that's one thing. The futures price, that's one thing. But the real actual physical price, that's completely something else. You know, totally something else. The demand is different than it's just a different demand. One, you really have traders who are really just trying to make paper gains using paper gold. And the other, you have physical, where people who are really trying to protect their physical lives, their physical wealth with physical gold. So you really have two very, very different things going on here. So that's a great point as well. Okay, so moving on, I want to go over to our website, silverbullion.com.sg. Take a look at what's going on there. Silver price right now, $25.99. Looks like we're going to have a $26 silver day. Gold is on the upswing as well. Maybe we'll have a $2,000 gold day. So both metals are doing good, both silver and gold. Platinum's on the uptick as well. So good. That's good for those metals. 15,000 ton capacity silver vault. It very well may be the biggest vault in the world. Still being renovated. Tell you what, that's going to be a sight to see. And yes, of course, you can buy metals with cryptocurrency as well. Silver to gold ratio 76.5. So we're starting to ease back off that 79, 80 range. But let's see how far we can go down. I know a lot of you folks are waiting for that 70 range, back in that 60 range. Let's hope it get there. It gets there. I am with you. If you don't know what this is right now, is it takes about 76 and a half ounces of silver to equal 1 ounce of gold price wise. But the truth of the matter is, historically, the ratio is at about 16 to 1, where 16 ounces of silver equals 1 ounce of gold. And the miners are telling us it's even lower at 8 to 1. They're getting 8 ounces of silver for every 1 ounce of gold. So when you look at this number being very, very high at 76, it tells you silver is very undervalued compared to gold. And it may be a good time, if you're on the fence trying to decide between which of the two to buy, maybe a good time to be buying silver. So again, this isn't financial advice. These are just things that I personally would do as well. Some of the products here that we do have, common products, maples, eagles, gold bars, silver bars. Let me run down here. Again, reserve is still under construction. Tell you, it's going to be really a sight to behold. Couple articles here about the reserve and where does gold come from. Well, scientists believe that it actually came from a supernova. And there were a couple of interviews that we had with Patrick Karim and again with Nick Giambruno. This is a pretty good interview with Nick. He laid it on the line in terms that a lot of us agree with and understand. A bit about our peer-to-peer program. This is I'll tell you something very unique that we do. And as you get to the bottom of the page, you can see some important places that you may want to look at. One of them being resources. And in fact, let me just click it up here. Resources is always a good place to look at, especially when it comes to things like payment options. You can choose any of these currencies here along with crypto. And all you need to do, let's say if you want to pay in euros, click on euro and it'll tell you how to do it. It'll tell you how to transfer over, including in Europe, they do SEPA type of transfer. So that is there as well. So again, resources, payment options, and then go ahead and click the currency that you would like to pay in. And again, peer-to-peer loans. This is the market right now for peer-to-peer loans. What this means basically is if you're storing with us, you can use what you're storing or have in storage with us that you own. You can use it as collateral to go ahead and take out a loan. In this case, someone is asking for a US dollar loan here. He wants to borrow for 1 month. He's asking his request. Okay, this is a request. So he's asking if he can have it at 3.5% annum. He would like to borrow 24,000, and he is using these items as collateral. So you can see here he's using a couple Monster boxes. He's using some 10-ounce bars, a few of these, which is going to total 100 in each. So he's using some 10-ounce bars and some Monster boxes. And again, he's asking for 24,000, and we do see people who are willing to lend, but looks like majority are at 4%. So his closest find to this 24,000 looks like it's going to be this here at 25,000. This person is willing to lend it, but at 4.25% annum. He's asking if he can get it at 3.5% annum. So maybe these two guys will kind of put in a new request, and maybe they'll be a little bit closer, and then there will be a match. And what will happen is this gentleman here, he will have a 1 month loan, which he can go ahead and get his 24,000 and pay it at the end of the month at whatever his percentage agreement is. So again, you can still, gold and silver just don't have to sit in a dark vault collecting dust. They can come back to life, and you can redeploy your assets. That's what they were meant for, correct? Moving on to Twitter. Let's see what's out there in Twitter. I'll try and keep this one a bit more on the short side. Let's see. Gold important safe haven to consider, says a market expert. Quit jiving us. I mean, are you serious? This is news to us, right? None of us here ever knew that this is coming from Fox Business, where he's saying gold is a safe haven to consider. But hey, at least more people out in the mainstream are starting to hear that, so that is a bit of good news. Inflation peekaboo. Inflation may have peaked or maybe not. And this was according to an article from Yahoo Finance where they're starting to, hit those drums saying, hey, inflation is peaked, and they're starting to toe the Federal Reserve line. Essentially, I believe they're still just trying to keep the markets up. They're jawboning the markets to stay on the upside and not really come down on the correction side. So again, be careful what people say. You really gotta sift through it. What's happening here in Asia? Indonesia is in a rough spot. The Russia dilemma raises doubts about the G20's future. Indonesia is going to host, I believe, the G20 coming up, and there are calls where they are asking Indonesia not to invite Russia. So again, we're going to see where this leads to. Indonesia, very, very tough spot. Thailand, fighting inflation. Lone robber daring gold shop heist. What he did was he had gone into a gold shop and he robbed a lot of gold jewelry. So I guess, he's been watching, a lot of people saying how gold fights inflation. So maybe he decided to get some things to help fight his inflation. Another item going on in Asia, Indonesia in particular, liquid gold. What's going on is we're having a shortage of cooking oil. Cooking oil. So this is hang on, chat, having a shortage of cooking oil, and so people are having to stand in line. They're getting rations for cooking oil, and unfortunately, there was an incident for cooking oil. So just to say that inflation shortages, they are global. They're not just in the West; they are also happening in places in Asia. So anyway, we'll move on. That was a look at Twitter. Let me see what some messages here. Okay, all right. So that was a look at Twitter. We're going to move on to the topic of the day. Sorry, guys. It's got a bunch of things going on. Some things aren't actually working the way they should. But we'll move on to the topic of the day, which is going to be sanctions. It's going to be sanctions. What it is, could it backfire, and where the U.S. dollar, where does it go if it should become sanctioned? And I'll show you an explainer on sanctions. But first, let me go ahead and take a look at the comments here. Let's see. All right. Yes, please. Thumbs up. Thumbs up. Thumbs up. Thumbs up. Can never have enough of that. What else is out there? JJ stacking peak inflation. Yeah, I think that's kind of laughable. I'm not seeing it. I think it's still gonna run. Let's see. Carrie Ellen Wilder, inflation hasn't even gotten to a good running. Hasn't even gotten to a running start yet. Wait till we see 30% per month. That's quite a bit. That's a lot. I hope we're all ready for that if it ever gets to that. Tweety Bird, let's see. Fight inflation. Well, I don't know. Maybe he's watching some other channels and decided, I don't want to say us, but maybe he said, hey, I need some gold here so to fight inflation, so I better go and get some things that can help me fight it. Who knows? Let's see. Yeah, Mr. Nguyen, I loaded up on oil when I heard the news. The thing with this oil, a lot of the palm plants that produces the oil, they're in the vicinity of these places where oil is being rationed, and it's like, well, wait a minute here. I can go down, a couple kilometers, and there's all these palm trees, palm tree farms that create the oil, but I can't get to them. The oil is taken, and then it goes somewhere else to be refined. And then the local communities, they are left without until it comes back from the refiners. So it's a strange thing. I mean, they're probably looking at the trees that produce the palm oil and wondering, hey, why are you rationing this palm oil here? It's right there. I can see it, but I can't get to it. And that's, I don't know, that's globalization for you, maybe. Who knows? So let me see what else is out there. JJ stacking, yeah, what happened to transitory? I don't know. Transitory, it may be making a U-turn, but in their definition, they in fairness, they could be correct in their definition of transitory. Inflation can go up and it can reach a point where it stops, but it never comes down. Let's say if it goes to 15% and then it stops. Well, they're correct. It was transitory. It stopped according to them. What they would say. So they're kind of half truthful with that. Anyway, let's move on. Back to the topic of the day. As I was saying, we're going to be taking a look at sanctions. What it is, could it backfire, and what happens with the U.S. dollar if it does become sanctioned? What happens to it? So I'll start with an explainer on sanctions first. So buckle up, guys. Here we go.
What if country A is misbehaving geopolitically, causing trouble left and right, thereby making weaker nations feel uneasy? What if country B is misbehaving economically? Anything from devaluing its currency aggressively so as to boost exports, to stealing intellectual property or at least tolerating theft. A few centuries ago, other countries would have been more eager to simply go to war. In our nuclear, mutually assured destruction age, however, let's just say there are more than enough reasons to think twice. As such, a lot of quote-unquote punishments have transitioned from the military to the economic dimension. Economic sanctions can range from a country simply responding symmetrically to the actions of another, to global efforts which revolve around multiple countries essentially isolating another nation economically.
Okay, so let's say if a country is not behaving, a country isn't behaving, sanctions will be imposed. Here's the thing: before times, no sanctions, just go to war and have it out. Go to war, have it out. But today it's totally different. I mean, you really don't want nations to go to war, and the first obvious problem, of course, is we have nuclear types of armaments, so you really don't want that war. And the thing is, with sanctions, by whose morality are we going by? So if you're saying, a nation isn't behaving, well, what if you're that nation and you feel you need to do something to correct the wrongs in your nation? Do you feel you're misbehaving? Maybe, maybe not. And again, we aren't taking sides here. We're just trying to say by whose morality is the world going by when it comes to sanctions? Because it's a big world. People have different cultures. They have different beliefs. So, it's something that we do have to consider, especially when it comes to morals, ethics. As I said, they're different all over the world. So perhaps sanctions are somewhat morals, yes, but it seems nowadays it's more about might. Who is the strongest? They're going to sanction with a whip, Does it make it right? Does might make things right when it comes to sanctions? All right, so let's move on. Another clip with sanctions.
Do sanctions work? They can. However, things get tricky if, one, other nations don't play along for geopolitical reasons. For example, sanctions against North Korea, which don't involve China meaningfully participating, aren't exactly effective. 2. Other nations don't play along for economic reasons. For example, Germany being dependent enough on Russian resources for them to sometimes have economic reasons to think twice before imposing sanctions on Russia. 3. The economy others try to punish is so large that we end up in an economic mutually assured destruction scenario in light of how interconnected everything is nowadays. Those who think it would be a walk in the park to impose sanctions on, let's say, China are deluding themselves. The list could go on and on. The bottom line is this: economic sanctions can be peaceful and remarkably effective conflict resolution options under the right circumstances. But aspects such as the deeply interconnected nature of our global economy and complex geopolitical as well as economic interests make the equation less than straightforward in most cases.
All right, so sanctions do get tricky if not all nations play along. The example here was Germany thinking twice about imposing sanctions on Russia because of economic reasons. Give it time. Give it time, gang. We may actually see this. And then there is mutually assured economic destruction. That is the sad truth. Sanctions, yeah, they can be peaceful. However, in this interconnected world, sanctions, they absolutely do become a bit more complicated. Few comments here. I saw a good one I want to get to. Tweety Bird, absolutely. Sanctions don't work. When my dad took my cap gun away, I just borrowed another one. There you go. So that's down home look at sanctions and why they don't work. Let me see. I saw another one out there. Let me take a look at it. Hang on. Let's see. This is true too. We hear a lot of people say it. There's two games going on. One person is playing chess, the other person is playing checkers. They got to be playing the same game, gang. Otherwise, we're all gonna be in a bunch of trouble if they're not, and they all need to come to some type of an agreement here. Anyway, I saw another comment, but I can't seem to find it now. I'll look for it a bit later. Anyway, moving on. So I do want to stop here though. And we know some countries in Europe are starting to crack, and Hungary is an example. They need energy. I want to ask you guys, what happens if a major country like Germany gives in? They give in and take sovereign unilateral interests over multilateral interests. Would we have a domino effect, especially in Europe? I mean, the instability and uncertainty of countries will lead to uncertainty of currencies. This is also going to unfold. It's going to lead to uncertainty of currencies. And I would strongly believe countries will look to strengthen their currencies either via having resources or their reserve currencies. Try to strengthen it, maybe having more neutral reserve assets, or by military might. Things are going to change. There's going to be a lot happening in the background. And what is that reserve currency? More specifically, a neutral reserve currency. It's gold. It's gold. And I want you guys to take a look at this. Yeah, I found this pretty interesting here. Let me get to my place here. Things aren't working today, but it's like that sometimes. So anyway, let me get to my this website on central bank holdings. Sorry about that, guys. This is pretty interesting because it says how gold plays an important part in central banks' reserves management, and they are significant holders of gold, being the central banks. The gold reserve data, or this data here, compiled using the IFS statistics, tracks central banks' reported purchases and sales along with gold as a percentage of their international reserves. Okay, so just scroll down here, and what we're going to do is we'll just use the tree map. We'll look at quarterly, and we'll look at gold reserves in tons. Now, it's been said that Russia really saw what happened back in when QE started back in 2011, and they had started accumulating gold. So I can go back to Q1 of 2011, and we can see that Mexico increased 93 tons, Russia increased 22, Thailand even increased by 9, Tajikistan, Sri Lanka, all these countries started increasing, while we have these countries who were actually selling gold. Okay, so we can go to Q2 of 2011 down here, and we see Russia 25 tons, Thailand again 18, Mexico again 5, Philippines is in there, and Sri Lanka again. So you can see these countries at about the time of QE1 were really starting to load up on gold, while these other countries were actually selling, such as Australia, such as Switzerland. The central banks anyway were selling. We can move on into Q4 of 2011 or Q3, and you can see South Korea is in there. So is Thailand, Russia, Venezuela, Bolivia. So these countries are central banks. They are buying gold. You can see Philippines sold pretty heavily. So again, these are the sellers, and these are the buyers of gold. So it was pretty much this way all throughout, the 2020, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, well, Russia was a buyer. And then we came into the time of the bug. So if we look at Q1 of 2020 during the time of the bug, you can see Turkey, huge buying. Their central bank buying a lot of gold. Russia was buying a lot of gold as well. India is in the mix. Interesting, we started seeing Arab states. Arab countries started buying gold at this time as well, along with Uzbekistan. So Q2 of the bug period. Turkey again up there. India, Ecuador, Argentina, Uzbekistan. And the sellers, Colombia, selling a lot of its gold. Okay, so we can see here Germany even selling It's gold. Central bank is selling gold. We can go down to Q3 of 2020. Again, UAE, India, Qatar, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, all buying gold. And you can see the sellers. Turkey sold a huge amount of gold. Philippines was also selling gold, as well as Uzbekistan. So, I mean, all I'm trying to point out here is you can see that gold does move with central banks. They buy gold and then they sell gold. And I just want to get to one more here. I think it was Q2 of 2021. Yeah. And this is where we saw Singapore, first time in about 20 years, buy 26 tons of gold. Last time they bought gold was in 2020. Here they are buying 26 tons. So again, Thailand, Brazil, Singapore, India, Turkey, all of these nations buying a lot of gold. And again, on the selling side, Germany is selling gold again. Russia was also selling some of their gold from central banks. So I found that one pretty interesting because it shows Russia has been accumulating gold at about the time of the great financial crisis. Even during the previous highs of gold back in 2011, they were still buying, and through QE, they were still buying. So not only does it have natural resource assets, of course, being energy, it also has neutral reserve assets, and that being gold. So with resources the world needs and large economic friends to support them, how then do you sanction a country such as this without heading into a mutually assured economic destruction? How are you going to do this? So let me take a look at a few comments here. Okay, let's see. Interesting comments. Let me see if I can pull one out here. Let's see. Mr. Harvey, sanctions don't work. The country with the big letter R boomed. The West trade in ruble, dollar gone. RNC could dump dollars, make them toilet roll. Absolutely. That is absolutely true. And this is why it's getting kind of dangerous. This is why, you hear this word mutually assured economic destruction. It's a great point there. So let me take another look at sanctions through another clip here.
We can bring in our international affairs editor, Armin George. And Armin, good to see you. The EU was extremely united in the aftermath of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Is that still the case?
Well, I mean, the cracks appeared some weeks ago at the Versailles summit here near Paris. It became obvious that different EU countries were not willing to move at the same speed when it comes to energy sanctions. And we now have a situation in the EU, Delano, at the one end of the spectrum. Lithuania has unilaterally decided to stop importing Russian gas. That is a sovereign Lithuanian decision. It is not an EU decision. And at the other end of the political spectrum, Hungary, as you said, saying that it's willing to pay for Russian gas in rubles. But, Hungary is by no means alone, actually. Austrian government officials said that if there were to be sanctions on Russian gas, that would end up hurting Austria more than it would hurt Russia. So when Ukrainian officials entreat, stop buying Russian gas, that emotionally doesn't seem to be cutting through with some EU member states. And of course, Germany, a major player in all of this, saying that while it's willing to reduce its dependence on Russian gas by the end of this year, it doesn't have the infrastructure to do that right now. It seems that the EU is kind of in a very familiar zone now that it's not really going to easily get out of when it comes to this energy question.
So cracks emerging within among the 27 member states.
All right. So to avoid sovereign, mutually assured economic destruction via sanctions, as mentioned, we are seeing cracks. And before this is over, it will turn into every man for himself. And that may be the sad reality of it all, where it becomes every man for himself. And it's something that Egon von Greyers even spoke about. It's something that we've been talking about as well, especially when it comes to cracks with what we've been seeing. And I saw interesting comments here from Abel Malcolm. Sanctions should be rare. It should be rare. And they should be justified. It should be done in cooperation should be done in cooperation with the United Nations. That part, maybe you would like it. You would like to have friends join in the fight with you, but in other cases, you may risk friendships. You may be risking your friendship. So it's really a double-edged sword. But absolutely correct. It should be used sparingly at best. Let me see what else is out there. Okay. Right. Let's see. Yeah. Here you go. Vincent throwing in this comment here at Matt Bittner. At the end of the day, we have an oil-dependent world. Absolutely true. This black gold will be in demand. Economics has it that if a good is in demand, money will flow towards obtaining it. So yes, absolutely true. Even all this talk of green, green energy movements. I saw an article where a windmill, I believe it took up to like 60 liters of oil. I believe, I could be wrong, just to lubricate, that green energy windmill. It takes, I believe, 60 liters of oil. So how green is green? Are we talking light green where it's very, very green? Or are we talking dark green where you still need some oil in there and fossil fuels? I mean, what shade of green are we talking about? Anyway, this can definitely be a topic for another day. So let me move on to I believe we're here. So let me move on. So thing is, how do you tell your friends to starve? How do you tell your friends to starve or to it's okay to be cold, just grab another blanket, when you're asking them to join in the fight and do sanctions. At the same time, they're hurting within their own country. At some point, the people of that country are going to, be pretty upset with their leaders and say, hey, you need to take care of us first. So let me move on to another clip with sanctions. Oh,
What
hang on,
about
this should be it.
between Washington and the EU?
Well, the US can go further for the simple reason that it's less dependent on Russian energy. There was already a move towards energy independence during the Obama presidency that continued afterwards, and so the U.S. has a freer hand in a sense, I suppose. I think there is a realization, though, that is sinking in now on both sides of the Atlantic that actually that asking Europe to go even further could lead to real economic problems in the EU and in the Eurozone. We've got this presidential election now in France where the two front runners, according to the polls, are both talking about inflation, prices, what they would do about rising prices, rising fuel costs. All of this is linked in some way to the energy question in Ukraine and Russia. Doing more, if that makes Europe if that brings on a recession that then makes it difficult for the EU to provide financial support for Ukraine, that would have a sort of boomerang effect on what the EU is trying to do. So I think there's a realization in Washington that it has to be a little bit careful on this. It can push the envelope out a little bit further with individual sanctions, with these bank sanctions that we've seen since yesterday. But if the US really wants to keep coordinating very closely with the EU, as it did before the 24th of February and really in the first few days of the crisis, then it's going to have to think very carefully about trying to push the EU to do a lot more.
Absolutely. So this is what we're kind of talking about. How far will individual sovereign nations go? Vincent chiming in. It will be interesting to see how Europe's stance towards Russia will change as the colder months approach. So we're going to head through summer first, but we're definitely going to get in those colder months. I think that's, I agree with Vincent wholly here. That's when we're going to really see things, this is where the rubber is going to meet the road. We'll see how things, how they're going to unfold. Rod Panhard, absolutely. Kazakhstan now has more gold than the UK. Kazakhstan has more gold than the UK. Um, it's a changing world, and this is why we see a lot of times we are seeing wealth transitioning over from west to east. So that's a good point there. Um, okay, so let's move on. What I want to do is show you just how sanctions have been going on through the years. Countries being sanctioned. So let's just take a look at this graphic here. So you can kind of see just through the 80s, Iran was sanctioned so heavily, and probably that had a lot to do with, back in the day, the whole, hostage crisis and things like that. That was a big deal back then, that we started seeing, places like, besides Iran, places like Iraq, places like Syria, starting to get sanctioned. Libya, Sudan, a lot of places in Africa started getting sanctioned from the US, and it just grows. It's just going to continue to grow. Right, so we saw a lot of red there, a lot of red in Asia, Eurasia, a lot of red. Over the decades, U.S. has been sanctioning these areas, and it's interesting because these are the same areas. When you look at the Belt Road Initiative, when you look at China's influence in Africa, these are the same places that have put their pieces on one half of the chessboard. So let me take a look at a little look at U.S. Sanctions again. Hang on, let me get through this article here. Let me take a look again at U.S. sanctions throughout history, or a short list of U.S. sanctions throughout history. So this is from Wikipedia. After the failure of the Embargo Act of 1807, 1807, the federal government of the U.S. took little interest in imposing embargoes and economic sanctions against foreign countries until the 20th century. U.S. trade policy was entirely a matter of economic policy. After World War I, interest revived. President Woodrow Wilson, same guy that brought in the Federal Reserve, promoted such sanctions as a method for the League of Nations. This was before they were the UN; they were the League of Nations, to enforce peace. However, he failed to bring the U.S. into the League, and the U.S. did not join until the 1935 League sanctions against Italy. However, in 1940, the U.S. participated in the ABCD line, which was, let me pull this up here, Japanese series of embargoes. The U.S. didn't join that against Japan. And the Helium Act of 1925, I understand there's a shortage of helium too now. But anyway, it forbade the export of that strategic commodity. Interest in trades as a tool of foreign policy expanded during the Cold War era, and many economic sanctions were applied. The Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act of 1986 was only in effect for 5 years, and later sanctions were additionally aimed against countries which the U.S. government listed as state sponsors of terrorism. One more paragraph here. Numerous U.S. unilateral sanctions against various countries around the world have been criticized by different commentators. Since 1998, the U.S. has imposed economic sanctions on more than 20 countries, and we just saw that graph there. And these sanctions, according to Daniel T. Griswold, failed to change the behavior of sanctioned countries, but they have barred American companies from economic opportunities and harmed the poorest people in the countries under sanctions. Secondary sanctions, according to Ravi Abdullah, often separate the U.S. let's see, often separate the United States and Europe because they reflect U.S. interference in the affairs and interests of the European Union. Since Donald Trump became the president of the U.S., Abdullah believes sanctions have been seen not only as an expression of Washington's preferences and whims, but also as a tool for U.S. economic warfare that has angered historical allies such as the EU. Interesting points there. One of them being, if you notice, the US, before being a superpower or its dollar being the world's reserve currency, the US had very little interest in sanctions or embargoes. They didn't really care for it. The trade policy was a matter of economic policy, though today it's a different story. It's a different story. So again, what do you think? Do sanctions really work? And seeing the history of it, U.S. is totally against it at one point. Then now, being having the world reserve currency, it's all for it. So it's a weapon. It is a weapon. It's a big stick to get what you want, to influence others, but at the same time, somebody else's priorities may be different from yours. So you start to create rifts in friendships. So something to keep in mind. Let's see. Let's see what else is out there. Okay, I tell you what, let's move on to another clip about sanctions.
Experts say that there are a few pillars of an effective sanctions policy. Firstly, sanctions policies should be well-rounded with both punitive measures and incentives to sweeten the deal, as was the case with Libya in 2003, when the country agreed to dismantle its weapons of mass destruction program. Sanctions should also be attainable and realistic. For example, trying to induce regime change through sanctions would be an unrealistic goal, which was what happened with the US embargo on Cuba under Fidel Castro. Another key pillar is multilateral support, especially in cases where the target is economically diversified. In March 2021, the US, Canada, EU, and the United Kingdom coordinated to impose sanctions on Chinese officials for alleged human rights abuses in Xinjiang. Last but not least, sanctions must be credible and flexible for the targets to feel the pinch, while recognizing the benefits of good behavior.
Increasingly, policymakers are recognizing the unintended consequences of wide-ranging sanctions and are opting for targeted measures instead.
All right, so it is true. There needs to be quite a few things that need to happen for sanctions to work. You can't just, okay, we're gonna close the spigot on this and expect it to work. No, there's a lot that has to go into it for it to work. And on top of that, we heard a new word, or at least another word: targeted sanctions. So what are targeted sanctions? These are sanctions that go after the rich. They go after the oligarchs. And I'll show you a clip from Twitter Spaces, which I had joined with Bloomberg Wealth, where they were talking about targeted sanctions.
Vladimir Potanin, who is Russia's richest person, and some people therefore have sort of scratched their heads and gone, hang on, he's Russia's richest person. Why hasn't he been sanctioned? And actually, he's been doing some pretty major stuff, making headlines this week, doing a deal. Devon, do you mind talking about that?
Sure. He is definitely one to talk about because he is Russia's richest person. And I would point out, quite interesting, yes, he has been sanctioned actually by Canada just recently. So he has been sanctioned by them, but he has not been sanctioned by the UK, not by the EU, not by the US. And of course, the governments aren't giving us, they're not really explaining themselves to who they're targeting and who they're not for various reasons. But you can kind of surmise that Potanin has not been sanctioned because he's really, the assets he controls are quite important on to global supply chains everywhere. I mean, really critical. We talk about sort of the risks of imposing sanctions on Russia. They, of course, produce a lot of oil. They produce a lot of natural gas. They produce a lot of important metals and minerals, which right now are very important for semiconductors and also for electric vehicles. And the companies in particular that Potanin controls dominate some of those industries. So one is a company called Nornickel. He owns a third of it. And Nornickel is responsible for 40% of the world's output of palladium, which is not a name we hear very often, but it's extremely important for cutting pollution in vehicles and their emissions. Nornickel also produces 20% of high-grade nickel, and nickel is really critical for electric vehicles. So, of course, electric vehicles sales are soaring right now. It's a loop, but they're soaring partly because we're seeing oil prices surge. Oil prices are surging partly because of the war. So high-grade nickel is really important. It's essential to have a steady supply for companies all around the world. So sanctions could really have an impact there if Potanin, who controls this company, were to be sanctioned. So he has not been sanctioned.
Okay, so let me move on. Let me show you this article here. Half of country R's 20 richest billionaires are not sanctioned, and as we heard there from Bloomberg Wealth, some people, I don't know, we have banks that are too big to fail. Maybe we have some people that are too big to sanction. So half of R's 20 richest people have not been sanctioned over its war in you, leaving a group of super rich, powerful billionaires free to operate around the world without legal restriction. And this is the thing, I mean, you want to call sanctions out here and there. You want your friends to join in with you, but yet you let some people go. You let some people go. What is this? Anyway, in total, tycoons worth a total of at least 200 billion before the W started have been hit by sanctions. Yet the list of who's blocked and who's not reveals a patchwork pattern of cross-border penalties that has spared many our citizens with business interests in key global markets. It's all about the money, guys. All about the money. The attempt to isolate country R from international finance and pressure President P while minimizing spillover to the global economy has seen the UK sanction 10 of the richest billionaires and the European Union 9. But the US, who is calling for all these sanctions, has just sanctioned only 4. Okay? Only 4. So out of the 20, only half were sanctioned. And out of those 10, only 4 did the US have the cojones to go ahead and sanction. We can see this gentleman here. Europe and UK. So the US did have the cojones to go ahead and sanction this gentleman here. I'm not going to pronounce the names. I'll just let you folks see it here. So again, Europe and UK sanctioned this gentleman. In this case, Europe didn't sanction him, so maybe Europe had some interest in there. In this case, all 3 of them did. In this case here, U.S. did not. But I mean, you can take a look at this, but it's just to say that when you have a nation asking other nations to come in and sanction another nation, and then when you have the richest people in these nations that you want to sanction, who probably have the strongest arm to twist the politicians to go ahead with what they want, or to go ahead and say, hey, enough of this, we gotta resolve this, enough of this, we can't deal with these sanctions, let's get this over with. They have probably some of the most strength to do it, but yet you don't. You don't come after these guys. Why? Because, hey, you have business interests with them. Maybe it's businesses on your end that has ties with them on their end, whatever it is. There's reasons why you don't want to go after these guys. And this, for me anyway, gets pretty disturbing. Very interesting. And as George Carlin said, it's one big club and you ain't in it. I'm not in it either. Vincent, are you in it? Who knows? And we are kind of getting a hint as to who is in this club and who is not. So the problem with targeted sanctions is when you go after that person, you risk closing down businesses that employ hundreds and thousands of people, and you end up perhaps hurting the poorest of the poor. You end up hurting the middle class. Again, this is a big issue where the country you intend to sanction boomerangs right back and you end up hurting your own people, your own country. You risk bringing down vital industries, and you can forget about winning the hearts and minds of people on both sides of the sanctions. You hurt the people you're sanctioning, you hurt your own people. So you hurt both ends. You do. So what do? I cannot say I have a geopolitical solution, or maybe I have one I'll keep to myself. But this geopolitical weapon called sanctions is going to cause nations to have to think of themselves, and it's going to cause them to think for themselves. As so should you. You grasp the big picture, see the spillover, keep your head on a swivel, and do the necessary things to promote life, living, and peace. Do the things to promote those things, because in the end, sanctions, they can spill over and hurt more people than they intended to. So do the things you need to do to promote living, life, and peace. And that's going to end the topic of the day. I'll move on to commentary, but first I want to take a look at your comments here, see what's going on. I found it interesting that there are some people that won't be touched. They won't be touched because of the businesses that they operate. So it gets back to all about the money. It all comes down to all about the money. Let's see. Yeah, Mr. Nguyen, there you go. Start your own club. Self-assigned bankers. Absolutely. What else is out there? Let's see. I'll let this comment in there. Yeah, U.S. sanctions mean spirited and are a prelude to war. It could be a sanction. We sanction countries that speak truth to power, but coddle and enrich other countries that are fascistic and evil. Well, I mean, I agree somewhat. I agree somewhat with that. Again, it depends whose morals and ethics you're looking at. That's one side of it. And then the other side of it is, does might make right? That's another side of it, another component of sanctions. So, again, this isn't meant to be a political, either you are this side or that side. It's just really meant to show a little bit of a history of sanctions. Why are they sanctioned? Do sanctions work? Do they don't work? But what really happens? When push comes to shove, you really start to tear friendships apart. And like I said, we're seeing a little bit of Europe starting to crack with Hungary, but I think Germany is going to be one of the keys, definitely going to be one of the keys. So we'll see how things in Europe unfold. Yeah, Michael Saylor, as I've said before, we can only play by their rules because we don't make them. That's a great point. Good point. I'll touch on that in just a bit, though. Let me see what else is out there. Let's see. John Bethea, gold-backed currency will take over as the new trade dollar. You know what? I'd personally like to see that. But then again, as we mentioned, it may kill off the futures market. But hey, maybe that's a good thing, right? So how do you have a futures market when gold is linked to a currency? Kind of almost impossible to do, right? Almost impossible to do. Anyway, let me get to a commentary section here real quick. If anything, we are seeing the de-dollarization genie coming out of the bottle. And if anything, this is a genie that probably cannot be put back in the bottle. Countries are going to move away, perhaps reject. And I'd say what they will have is going to be a currency for trade, as you guys just mentioned here. The rules are changing, and as they say, Michael Saylor, he who holds the gold makes the rules. Make your own rules, gang. Get the gold, get the silver, and the other things you'll need to protect and sustain life. Those are important. And I showed you countries that are getting the gold. I did not see the UK in there, central bank getting gold. I did not see the US getting any gold. I didn't see China getting any gold, but it's okay. We all know that the gold they produce stays in country. You didn't see them selling any gold either. But with the US, UK, you didn't see them buying or selling. You didn't see them buying or selling any gold. Kind of makes you wonder. Really, really kind of makes you wonder. So I'll take a look at a few more comments out here. Let's see. Thomas Schroeder, that is true. Famine changes everything. I sure hope we don't head that way, brother. I sure hope we don't head that way. That one's going to be really, 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 really difficult. Tweety Bird, didn't know this. In the 1700s, France banned barter and gold. I did not know that. What they do? If you know what they do, it'd be interesting for you to share that with us. Yeah, just so everybody knows, Michael Sayer, I'm not at all associated with the crazy sailor. Haha. Yeah, we'll see. You guys follow Michael on Twitter. He's always got some good comments on Twitter. So Mike, appreciate that. Let's see. Yeah, and Abel, this is the point. Isn't this the height of hypocrisy? U.S. increases the amount of oil it buys from Russia, but asks other countries to stop buying Russian oil. And in fact, I believe it started asking Venezuela and Iran if they can kick in some oil. So weren't these guys that also sanctioned? But again, like to say, when there's famine, things really, really start to change. So let's just say when there's a famine of oil, things are really going to start to change. And as Vincent pointed out, I think we're really going to see where everybody lies come winter. We're really going to see where people are. So, with that, I'll just say, again, happy Easter to you out there. It's supposed to be a good time. It is a good time, but happy Easter out there. Always try to be a blessing, not a burden with your family, your friends, your colleagues at work. Hey, colleagues, that goes for me too. But always try to be a blessing, not a burden. And just really keep your head on a swivel. There's a lot going out there. Understand all the options that you have, and don't be afraid to diversify and look into those options that are out there and available. Because the key point is, if you want your gold and silver to work for you, you need to have options for them to work for you. It's not always a straight line. You may have to diversify into places maybe you don't know that much about, maybe you don't even like. But if it's going to offer you an option, at least try to learn about it. So again, we're all in the same boat together. Appreciate you guys being here. Happy Easter to all of you. And let's just keep an eye on what's going on. So as always, saddle up for what's coming ahead. Silver up as well. Winners, be sure you email us, sbtv@silverbullion.com.sg, and we'll get you those Amazon gift cards. You guys take care. I'll see you next week. Just take care of each other. All right. See you.